Well, good evening again to all of you joining us in the broadcast and for all of you here. This evening, we are a bit double booked. We have this broadcast for Living Wisely, Living Well, but also we are having a class here at the center in Chennai, starting this evening. This is class number 1, on the book of Swami Kriyananda, which is called Money Magnetism, and how to attract what you need when you need it. And it's really a fascinating book, and one we're going to get into in this class series together. But therefore, because I'm sort of trying to, address two topics, or two audiences rather, I should say, I chose a different saying for tonight than the actual saying for this actual date in this book, Living Wisely, Living Well. And so I hope you'll forgive me for jumping out of sequence, but I did check, and it's not one that we would be covering later on this year. It's not on a Wednesday, and so, but it is related to this topic of money magnetism. And so I'd like to read it to you. Swami Kriyananda writes, "My bottom line for many years has been not money, profit, or outer success of any kind, but inner peace. I've refused to allow myself to become so stressed as to sacrifice that true wealth. I've even deemed it better, and experience has borne me out, to leave important things undone if my peace might be undermined by giving them attention. For without it, I would be prone to err. From inner peace have come enlightened decisions. People's expectations of me can never equal what God Himself expects, my peace in the thought of Him." This is such a powerful thought from Swamiji, that we should make our bottom line inner peace. I remember the first time I read this in a book that he had written, and I was really taken aback by it, because on the one hand, sometimes the thought people can have about, the bottom line normally is said to be profit. That's the phrase, the bottom line comes from the business world, and so no matter what, we have to make profit. And it's funny too, because the bottom line has a sort of implication of something that's very serious, something that's very important. It's funny how people are when it comes to money. Swamiji made this observation that even the subject of money, with the subject comes up, people's faces suddenly become very serious and very grim, and their voices are hushed, and they're talking about money. And he said, even see the air that many banks have, that people come in just sort of very piously and quietly, and they, submit their form to the teller window and hope that the gods will bless them with their own money back. It's kind of funny sometimes, but anyway, not to go on to that subject too much. We do, if you can sit in the front also, or there's a chair here. I have others with me, as I mentioned in the beginning, here in 3D, and so allow us for that too. So this concept of not something just serious and grim, that I want money at all costs, I want profit, and it's going to have to be something done with concentration and not too much laughter also, because it is serious, is something that comes up so often, or at least this was my exposure anyway. The irony is that why do most people want money? I need enough money so that I can have my house, or I can have my health, or I can have my children's education, or I can have my children's marriage, or I can have this few other desires satisfied, and so on, so that then, what? I can have peace. You see, it's really what people are seeking in many cases, why they want money, because money in itself is just a thing. It has no value in itself. we all found this out when back in November a few years ago when the government changed the currency on us. And so we had all these beautiful 500 rupee notes that were nice and yellow and worth nothing, and 1,000 rupee notes that were bright red and worth nothing. And so we suddenly got to feel how these wonderful bills of joy actually were useless now. And so we could see that the money itself had nothing to give us. You know, you couldn't even travel with it. You could get in trouble for traveling with expired rupee notes. I mean, they were actually a hindrance to us. So money has as much value as the expectations we put on it for what it will give us. And so that's why I'm saying inner peace is the true bottom line that we're having anyway. Because what do we want usually from our desires for money and the things that it will give us, but then we can have peace. For example, then we can have security, then for ourselves and for our loved ones. Then we can have joy. Then some people say, if I had enough money, then I just wouldn't have to work anymore. And so I could just relax and sip tea all day or badam milk and just have foot massages, and that would be so lovely. You know, I remember one woman who was telling me she was doing stitching work. I mean, she ran a business that had many tailors in it doing the stitching work. And we said, what inspired you to go into business for yourself? She said, if I wasn't doing this, I would just stay at home and fight with my husband. So, you know, basically for no reason, just because of sitting there, I'm tired, it's hot, why are you looking at me like that? Just start a fight for it to have something to do. And to get the blood going or the heart racing, at least have some excitement. And so she realized better to channel energy in a constructive direction. She had a very wonderful husband. He was a very nice man. It was, you know, and they had a very nice relationship. But still, she knew, I have to be busy. I have to have a direction. I have to move my energy in a certain way. Otherwise, if I just sit idle, I'll get bored. And this is what Master Yoganandaji said, that people are either happy or unhappy or bored. And it's sweet if you haven't heard the audio recording of him saying it. He says, you come up to someone and you say, are you happy? Don't bother me. Are you unhappy? Don't bother me. I am bored. And so this is when we get bored, we start to, as I said, sort of itch for some excitement of any kind. And so that's why it's good for us to be able to be engaged in activities that put our energy, help us to put energy out. Now, going back to this concept of making your bottom line inner peace. Okay, so we can say, my highest priority is my inner peace. That doesn't mean that if, you know, somebody is having an emergency in the hospital, we say, well, I'm sorry, but it's my meditation time right now. I hope you live, but I haven't finished my practice yet, and I've got to still get in 15 more minutes. No. If somebody's welfare is at stake, we will lose peace if we don't help them. So it doesn't mean we just stick to our priorities. This is what I've decided and nothing else. We may shift our priorities. However, that's usually not the problem many people have. It's more getting pulled into everyone else's priorities. And so it's important to look at for yourself, to keep yourself in the running. You want to have enough inner peace to keep your BP under control. You want to have enough inner peace to have you enjoying life and being calm enough to see, for example, even opportunities for money making. How often is it that things can just pass us by if we're distracted, if we're not paying attention? So I wanted to share with you a few more things that on this topic. First of all, what did Yoganandaji have to say on this? Well, as so often the case when you read something that Swami Kriyananda has written, you'll find Yoganandaji has written this very same thing. And so Yoganandaji said, what is success? If you have lots of health and lots of wealth, but lots of trouble with everybody, including yourself, you have very little. And this is an important thing to think about. If we are looking at, but there must be maximum income and maximum profit at all times for me, it's perfectly wonderful to put energy in that direction. But again, think about what real success would be, what you would truly like. Do you want all the money and to be unhappy? No, 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 of course, because the money will make me happy. But you've known people, I'm sure, who have had lots of money but have felt that they had none and were therefore miserable. Or people who had lots of money. One thing that very few people have experienced, but is very true of wealthy people, is that they have very few friends that they can trust. Because when somebody comes to them and says, "Ah, nice to meet you," they wonder, are you after me because of something you can get from me, or are you just interested in me as I am as a person? You may have experienced this not with lots of wealth, but, which is possible, of course, or with other things. When someone is approaching you with ulterior motives, and you're not sure if they're sincere. This is something that wealth, fame, other things bring with them. Not necessarily desirable. A famous person has complained that what I miss most is anonymity. I can't just go to the store. I, have all these people coming after me. I'd just like to go and live life like a normal person, like I used to. And it's wonderful how Master says, if you have lots of trouble with everybody, including yourself. That's the other thing, is we have to work things out with ourselves inside. If we are uncomfortable about something and think that, okay, enough wealth will soothe this, it may not. And to put it another way, if there is something inside of us that is upsetting us, we have a shot at working it out even now, with the wealth or without the wealth. And then, not only will it help us to enjoy life better and to enjoy whatever wealth does come, but in fact it may help us to even attract that wealth. Because as we'll see in the rest of our class, after the camera is turned off, that expectation and attitude are essential in attracting wealth. Master continues, "The entire purpose of life becomes futile if you cannot find happiness. When wealth is lost, you have lost a little. When your health is lost, you have lost something. But when your peace of mind is lost, all is lost. Therefore, success must be measured by happiness, by your ability to remain in harmony with cosmic laws, rather than by health, prestige, or wealth." And I should mention that though we are then making happiness or inner peace our bottom line, how to go about it. Because we can't just say, inner peace is my bottom line. And then the boss comes and says, where is that report? I'm sorry, inner peace is my bottom line. So, it would affect my peace too much to write that report right now. I'm playing solitaire. And so then we find ourselves playing solitaire out on the curb with no job. And then the boss has his peace again, and we're suddenly saying there's something wrong with this philosophy. So how do we go to steps? Yes, I would like to be peaceful, but if you knew the kinds of pressures I was under, if you knew how hard I have to work, if you knew how worried I am about this or that, you would not talk about peace. Well, how did Swamiji go about this? He writes more in another course, actually, Material Success Through Yoga Principles is what it's called, about steps he took to help make peace his bottom line. "One choice I made," Swamiji writes, "was never to let myself be drawn into other people's priorities. Perhaps among the many letters I received, there were a few that I didn't answer promptly, or, in some cases, at all. I paid my bills promptly and met all my important obligations, but I simply accepted with a sense of inner freedom that I was not the legendary Atlas. I could not carry the whole world on my shoulders. If, then, someone wrote me a letter that I didn't feel to answer, even though that person was obviously anxious to hear from me, I sometimes didn't answer him. Well, I told myself, I didn't ask him to write. Only if someone's well-being was concerned did I try conscientiously to help him as soon as possible. What use would I have been to anyone, however, had I done everything that was asked of me, but sacrificed my inner peace? Interestingly, I found that if I didn't address an issue that to others seemed urgent, it usually resolved itself anyway within a couple of months. Swamiji gives us another strategy or idea. What I learned was the necessity for devoting all my energy and attention to everything I did. This is really important. Again, and we saw it all the time with Swamiji. If he was writing a book, he would just focus completely on that book, and you couldn't really tear him away from it for anything. And if he was going to give a lecture tour, or if he was really doing anything, focusing on a complicated challenge that had come up, he just put his whole attention on it. This is one of the secrets of his powers of accomplishment, because he wrote 149 books, over 400 pieces of music, founded 8 or 9 communities, and so on. It's just unbelievable what energy he was able to channel. He was very successful, and also financially. But one of those things that we saw in him was his ability to focus, to put his energy in, and to not be distracted. And he had to fight to not be distracted, because there were plenty of distractions. Jyotishji tells the story of when he was Swamiji's secretary, and he would come in to tell Swamiji something, and Swamiji would be writing something, and he would just say, "Just a minute." And he would write sometimes even for 5 or 10 minutes. Because he was really focused and finishing that, and as soon as he was done, he then said, "So, what do you have for me?" or something like that. He really emphasized too that, to put it another way, one reason why people don't accomplish as much is because they allow themselves to be pulled off. Most things can wait, but the thing you're in the middle of, there was an extreme example of one of Swamiji's friends who was building a brick walkway. And right about the time they were going to, they had cleared everything, they had made the sort of underbed, and they were just about to start placing the bricks or pouring the cement. You'll have to forgive me, laying the tile. I don't remember exactly what it was made out of. That right at that moment, somebody else called them and said, "Why don't you come in and have some tea?" And they said, no, listen, we're almost done. We just want to finish this." And the person said, "Oh, come on, don't work too hard. You don't want to, get stressed. Just come and have tea." And they said, "All right." And so they came in and they had tea. And then at the end of that tea, some emergency happened, that somebody called and they had some problem, and they had to rush out. And that launched a whole series of events that they ended up finishing that walkway. How long? 1 year later. And the man ruefully said, "If I had just pushed on a little bit at that moment, I could have finished it." This is in fact a very common thing you may find in your life, that when you're just at the breaking point, or you're just at the, I've cleaned all of this, but I can't clean that. Or I have checked this many reports, but 2013 I'm going to have to do some other time. But I've had enough. But if you just make an extra push, then suddenly you break through. Perhaps the task becomes easier, or you break through a barrier of unwillingness that allows more energy to come through, or you just attract more help to yourself, or you just finish the darn work, and then you're free from it. Because remember, when we have a half-finished project, it eats away at our peace of mind. It's back here, undone, still hungry, going, and distracting us because it's not put to bed. At least if you have a mind that's anything like mine. It would be fine to just say, "Who cares, all is Maya, and I'm not bothered." But I am bothered if there's something that's not brought to its conclusion. And so, again, keep these things in mind as strategies for how to work with your inner peace profit. Swamiji continues, "Having decided on peace as my bottom line, I refused to worry over decisions that were important but couldn't be faced yet." So that's another thing too. How many times do we worry about something? Oh my gosh, in a year I'm going to have to. Who cares? No point in worrying about it now. Focus on, as he says actually in the next sentence, I addressed them with full concentration only when the time came to do so. Meanwhile, I concentrated more on keeping my inner peace and joy while doing whatever needed to be done at present. And so again, this is a very important thing to keep in mind, that you do what's in front of you, and as Swamiji says elsewhere, save future problems to be solved by future energy. Trust that when this day comes and this thing you have to face, that you'll have the energy to do so. There's a lot you can do in the meantime to build up your energy reserves and so on. But the point is not to be fretting and worrying about a problem whose time has not yet come. If you see a third grader worried and you say, "What's the matter?" and they say, "I have a math exam," and say, what are the questions about? And they say, "Calculus." You say, "Calculus? I mean, aren't you in third grade?" They say, "Yes, but in 8 years I'm going to have a calculus exam." Well, why don't you just multiply some fractions, while you're at it, just now? That can come later. Don't worry about it now. So in the same way, we should watch our worries. And again, save future problems to be solved by future energy. So, I think that's more or less all the time that we have tonight. And there's a lot more that could be said on this subject. I would encourage you to, of course, if you don't have the Living Wisely, Living Well book, to get the book. But also this Make Your Inner Peace Your Bottom Line is something that you can read about more in Material Success Through Yoga Principles, as I mentioned. Also related to this is Swamiji's book, The Art of Supportive Leadership, and probably other things besides. His book of letters, In Divine Friendship, also talks a lot about different decisions he made in maintaining his peace under a lot of stressful circumstances. Sometimes people think, oh, all Swamiji had to do was just sit and meditate, and everything was just built all around him. All I can say is if he had just sat and meditated only, then that's all would have happened, as he would have sat and meditated. It's true, he had profound meditations, and his harmony and attunement with the gurus helped this grace flow through him to manifest so many things. It's essential, and yet he worked very hard, giving classes in 6 different cities, 6 different days of the week, going up to Ananda, not a single break, and earning all the money to pay for Ananda through yoga, meditation classes, to pay for the land, I should say, in the early years. Worked non-stop, and that work continued as he, as I said, earned the money to help build Ananda. So it wasn't just falling from the sky and just landing in everybody's, putting out pots to catch all the falling money. And so, anyway, keep this in mind in your life, and thank you again for joining us. Good night.